Today we will be going over the final video in section 5, deploying your application, deploying to a custom server. We'll be using a package called MeteorUp, or MUP for short, to be able to deploy to our custom server. So we'll show you how to install that. We'll show you what the configuration files look like and how to set this up on your own server. And finally, we'll show you how to deploy and test this to your own server. And we'll even throw in a little bit of Nginx reverse proxy for you. So let's go ahead and get started. This time around, our domain is hosted by DigitalOcean as a droplet called Snippets. Okay, we're going to go into the DNS entries and check those to make sure that we have a subdomain for snippets.edge.io. And we do. It's a simple internal CNAME redirect to edge.io, so everything looks like it's in shape there. We're now going to go onto the server itself. Okay, and we're going to look at one of the Nginx configuration files. This one is specific for the subdomain snippets.edge.io. Okay, and inside of here, you're going to see something pretty interesting. Instead of handling it directly on port 80, we're going to be listening on port 80 for the server name snippets.edge.io. But then if we look inside of the location and the proxy pass, it's actually going to something very familiar to us, localhost 3000. Nginx is going to take care of the translation for us, so all we have to focus on is getting that service up and running on localhost 3000. Okay, we need to install MUP on our local development environment, so we're going to do a sudo npm install-g MUP and enter our password. This is sped up for your convenience, and thus we'll install MUP, and we'll go ahead and test it just by putting in the command mup, hitting enter. It looks like it is running. We're going to go ahead now and configure it. We're going to go ahead and initialize our project by typing mup init, and just like that, we created an empty project. Notice we are inside of our snippets folder. There are two files, the settings.json file, which we don't need to worry about, and then the mup.json file that we're clicking on right here. Okay, this particular file tells us where we're going to be installing this application. So the host name is going to change from host name, obviously, to snippets.edge.io. We have a user ID and password, but we're going to go ahead and obfuscate that for this video. We want it to install Mongo or set up Mongo, so we're going to set that to true. We also want to set up Node. We want to go to the latest version, which is 10.34, so we'll change that. We want to install Phantom.js on the server, and then we're going to have an application name. And this application name, we're going to go ahead and change it to Snippets. Now, the location of the app, this is asking where is your application located on your dev machine. Since this file is located inside of our root project folder, we're just going to go ahead and make a simple reference to snippets, the .. and that will tell us where our application is located. All right, everything looks good on side of there. Now, remember that we are using Nginx to redirect to localhost 3000. So inside of the root URL, instead of putting snippets.edge.io, we're going to go ahead and just put localhost, and then we're going to tell it which port. And you guessed it, we're going to go on port 3000. So we'll go ahead and put that in there. Okay, we're going to save all those changes, make sure everything looks good. And now we're going to set up our server. This is before we deploy. We're just going to set up the environment. So we're going to go into the terminal, and inside the terminal, we are going to put in mup setup. Now this will install Node.js onto our server, and you can see the log that's going on here. This is also sped up. It actually takes quite a while to install Node, Phantom, and everything else, MongoDB, that we need on the server. But you should, after a while, be able to see the success. Everything looks like it was set up properly. And now we simply have to type mup deploy, mup deploy. Okay, this will create our build, and it will upload that bundle to our server. It'll set up any environment variables that we have, and then it will invoke the deployment process, which means it'll keep running as if it were in production. We now want to test our configuration file back on the server. So logged into the server, we're going to type in nginx-t. This will check the syntax of our configuration file, and it will run a preliminary test to make sure that it was successful. And it looks like the configuration is set up properly. So looks like everything's shipshape up and running. we're going to first test this again on the server. We're going to do a simple curl command, and inside this curl command you can see we got some HTML back and we got a Meteor runtime config, so it looks like we're good. We're going to run it in the browser and see what happens. So we're going to go to a browser and we're going to type in snippets.edge.io, hit enter, and lo and behold, our service is running. Create a user like usual, user1@test.com, and we are going to add our first custom server deploy snippet. How about that? It's been quite the journey, but we finally have our snippets application deployed on our own server. As you might expect, the folks at Meteor are going to make this process even easier in the future, so stay tuned for that. All right, we were able to install and configure Meteor up in our development environment. Through the use of setup and through the use of deploy, we were able to deploy this to our servers. And finally, we were able to test this deployment using the host name for our custom server. Well, thank you so much for joining us for this series. It's been my absolute pleasure to walk you through all of what Meteor can do in such a short amount of time. On behalf of everybody at Packt Publishing, thank you very much for watching. We hope that you enjoyed this series, and we hope that you'll join us again for yet another series in the many, many video tutorials we have available on packtpub.com. Thanks.